This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Alex Albon just bagged a P5 at the Miami Grand Prix, bouncing back superbly after having the disappointment of his P4 Miami Sprint result snatched away through a safety car infringement. This makes it 5-point scoring finishes in the first 6 weekends of the 2025 Formula 1 season for the Thai British driver. 30 points on the board, P8 in the World Drivers' Championship, and as his biggest fan, I'm absolutely loving it. Alex Albon is thriving. He is not being battered by Carlos Sainz, and I believe he's proven a lot of people wrong. So what better time to reflect on his up and down career so far and speculate about what the future might hold. My name's Tomo, let's talk about it. As a youngster, Alex Albon was very briefly part of the Red Bull Junior program, being signed up in 2012 as a 15-year-old, but was dropped the end of that very same year. It was a fleeting experience that would come full circle, but his karting career as a kid was pretty glowing, reputation-wise. However, moving to junior formulas proved a bit more challenging for him to really stand out amongst his peers. Formula Renault, Euro F3, GP3 and F2 all saw steady improvements in competitiveness year on year, culminating in a superb P3 in the 2018 Formula 2 season, shy of George Russell and Lando Norris. Thing is, Alex was never destined for Formula 1. He'd already lined up a Formula E seat for EDAMS in 2019, the FE version of the Formula 2 team he'd raced for in 2018. He'd gone 7th quickest in the 2018 Formula E rookie test and was set to race alongside another ex-Red Bull driver, Sebastian Buemi. However, Daniel Ricciardo had other plans, didn't he? The butterfly effect was real, with him moving to Renault for 2019. That opened up a vacant seat at Red Bull Racing. Pierre Gasly was promoted from Toro Rosso into that Red Bull seat ahead of the 2019 season, leaving a vacancy there alongside Daniel Kvyat. And thanks probably in part to his past relationship with Red Bull and that very impressive Formula 2 season, Alex Albon got the call. The dream he'd all but given up on was all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a reality. Now, I actually think Daniel Kvyat was a fantastic benchmark for Alex to compare himself to in that debut rookie season. And look, to summarise, I think he did a pretty good job. In the 12 races where they were teammates, their average finishing positions, excluding retirements, for Kvyat was P10.6 and for Albon P11. And then you look at average qualifying gap, it was 0.013 seconds advantage Alex. Basically nothing in it. Now, was it perfect? Absolutely not. He had a shunt in Hungary, he had a big shunt in China. But given that lack of pre-season preparation, he handled himself very well in one lap pace. Great racecraft. We saw Kvyat and Albon going side by side in Hungary as well. That was simply lovely. And you know what? I think he was a pretty calming presence within that team. Look, Pierre always did a good job at that Red Bull Junior team, but he was certainly known for his fiery demeanour at times, wasn't he? Albon, on the other hand, was a very chill guy and clearly made a very good impression with not just the senior management at Toro Rosso, but the senior management at Red Bull Racing. And talking of good impressions, if you want to make one, whatever the application may be, why don't you check out today's video sponsor, Squarespace. Build your very own beautiful online home, a website you can be proud of, with thousands of beautiful drag and drop templates at your fingertips, seamless AI powered tools like their Blueprint AI website builder, the ability to manage your payments all in one place if you've got an e-commerce website, and 24/7 customer support if you ever need some help. Squarespace really does have it all. I've got my merchandise site, TOMMO'SRacingGoods.com, powered by Squarespace, of course, and it's completely free to try. It's only billable once you've got that finished website ready to go, and when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TomIF1 to get 10% off of your very first website or domain. When Pierre Gasly was dropped after the 2019 Hungarian Grand Prix, it was Alex Albon given the opportunity to take the wheel for that Red Bull from Belgium onwards ahead of Daniel Kvyat. Look, of course, Daniel was disappointed not to be given that opportunity, considering as well he'd driven very well for Red Bull Racing in 2014, but they had already tried that with him. They must have had data on Daniel, and they must have seen the similarity in Albon and Kvyat's performances and just decided, you know what, it's worth a punt on Alex. From a performance evaluation point of view, if Alex hadn't done a good job at the end of 2019, well, then they would have known, all right, maybe Gasly's not us, maybe Alex is not us, and then maybe Kvyat, because we know him, he's worked with the team before. Look, I do also think it's important to remember that at the time, this whole Red Bull curse had not made itself known. Daniel was close to Max in 2018. Max was quicker and the better driver, but it wasn't that bigger gap between them. And so when Pierre Gasly came in and was miles off Max, he got zero benefit of the doubt. He was simply deemed not good enough to make that step up. Now we know in hindsight, looking at Pierre's performances now, that is of course not the case. He is a very, very capable Formula One driver, but he was the first one to trip up. So then Alex was given the remaining 9 races of the 2019 Formula One season at Red Bull Racing, and you know what? That was probably his best stint in that car. 9 Grand Prix, top 6 finishes in all of those races, bar the Brazil P2 that got away. Do not remind me. Average finishing positions, excluding retirements, for Verstappen in those 9 races, P3.86. For Albon, P7. But that is seriously skewed by Sao Paulo. If you ignore Sao Paulo entirely, Alex's average finishing position was actually P5.25. And if you give him the P2 that he probably should have got on in Brazil, that I'm not remotely bitter about still, Lewis, it would have been P4.89, which is pretty good. As for qualifying gap wise between Max and Alex in those 9 races, there were only actually 7 representative sessions and the average was bang on half a second. I think it's fair to say Alex was holding his own well in the races that side by side with Sebastian Vettel in Brazil. I will never forget that moment. That was oh god. But that 1 lap performance definitely needed some work. Half a second is not good enough, but Alex was still in his rookie season, remember? Alongside a driver who's established himself as one of the greatest of all time right now and was well on the way back then. Given all that, Red Bull making the decision to keep Albon in that seat for 2020, I think was a bit of a no-brainer. Give him the chance to develop and grow and mature into this seat, and things should be even better in 2020. That was not the case, was it? I was full of optimism going into that 2020 season, thinking, you know what, look, he's done a good job relative to Max, a decent job race performance-wise, in particular relative to Max in that Red Bull at the end of 2019. He should only get better. What actually happened is that he went backwards in a shortened 17-race season. In 2020, Max had an average finishing position of P2.42, a pretty significant step up from where the Red Bull was competitive-wise in 2019, whereas Alex fell back to an average of P7.75, over 5 positions worse than Max. In fact, of the 12 races Max finished that season, he had a lot of DNFs that year. He was on the podium 11 times out of 12, including 2 race wins. And of the 16 races that Alex finished, he was on the podium twice, both in P3. Gasly got 12 races and showed in that 12 race span that he was nowhere near Max. Now Alex had 26 races and once again showed that he was nowhere near Max and not the right driver for that seat. Both experiments had failed and Max continued to not have a teammate who could fully back him and fully support him in a championship fight, which going into 2021, especially with the Mercedes floor changes, Max and Red Bull were up there in terms of Lewis is finally going to get a challenge. And that is exactly what happened. But then an opportunity presented itself because Checo was unceremoniously dumped by Aston Martin in favour of Sebastian Vettel, a known quantity, been about for years, consistently punched above their weight at Force India. 2020 was an incredible season for Sergio Perez. He won the Sakhir Grand Prix, of course, thanks in part to George's failures, but he did an incredible job driving from the back to the front. He really showed what he could do that year and showed that he definitely deserved a seat at the F1 table. Red Bull's junior strategy approach was not working. It's a no-brainer. You snap up Perez, and that's exactly what they did. And as for Alex Albon, didn't even get to fall back onto the AlphaTauri seat because again Pierre was doing such a good job and Yuki was very much in there with the support of Honda, so he had to fall out of F1 entirely to a sim test reserve driver role at Red Bull Racing for 2021. I mean, to sit out the entire 2021 season must have been incredibly difficult to stomach, especially given Alex was following the team around in the F1 circus as the reserve driver. Speaking in 2021, at the first race it was torture, but I got into the rhythm of it. If anything, it increased my desire to be back on the grid. There is still a championship to win, so we're pushing flat out, and I'm in the simulator a lot. Now, Alex made the conscious approach to lean into this responsibility and do the best job he possibly could. You'd have forgiven him for being reluctant and resistant and bitter, but by all accounts, his attitude was exemplary. In fact, after Checo took his very first race win as a Red Bull Racing driver at the 2021 Baku Grand Prix, he had some very, very complimentary words specifically for Alex. He's putting so much work into the simulator with the engineers. I remember when I came here, you wouldn't expect him to be so open with me, but he explained to me all the issues he'd had, how the car works, and was very nice since day one to have from him. I really appreciated that. But look, no matter how much Alex was throwing himself into the team game at Milton Keynes, a return to F1 was of course his top priority. Gasly was performing unbelievably well in the 21 AlphaTauri, and Honda were keeping Yuki Sweet alongside him, so no opportunity there. Now Alex did need to keep sharp, so he spent summer 2021 racing in DTM reasonably successfully, although not quite as successful as Liam Lawson. But that was never for the long term, and since that, Alex has revealed that if F1 didn't happen, if he didn't find his way back in, then IndyCar was in fact the priority. I had to think about a plan B route. IndyCar at the time attracted more so than Formula E. I went to Indianapolis to watch the race and I liked it. I obviously had a chat with Romain Grosjean as well and it looked exciting, but my priority was always F1. And so the stars aligned and it came to be. George Russell finally getting his shot at that main Mercedes seat, replacing Valtteri Bottas for 2022. That left a vacancy at Williams alongside pay driver Nicholas Latifi. Now, fair play to Red Bull on this one because they would have been well within their rights to keep Alex in that test sim reserve role job that he was doing so well. But instead, they actively backed him, tried to help him facilitate a move to the two seats available at the time, which was Alfa Romeo and Williams. Christian Horner at the time said Red Bull would accommodate whatever we can to make sure he's back in a race seat next year. He's a lad that deserves an opportunity in Formula One next year and we're doing our best to try and help him achieve that. There was a bit of a concern at the time, wasn't there, that Red Bull Honda links to Alex would, you know, affect Williams Mercedes links. They might not like that cross-pollination because Albon was still carrying sponsors at Red Bull Racing. But fortunately, that didn't get in the way. Valtteri went to Alfa, Alex went to Williams. If Valtteri had gone to Williams, look at where it'd be now and look at where Alex would be. Damn, those kind of decisions back then, Williams and Alfa Romeo just, you know, it felt like almost a bit of a toss-up between the two. But now in 2025, I bet Valtteri has a bit of regret. But you got to remember, this is a struggling Williams at the time. They'd finished P8 in the Constructors the year prior, and that was helped massively by that George Russell just freak result in the rain at the Spa race that never happened. Going into 22, Dalton Capital, you know, hadn't had much time at the wheel of that organisation, and James Vowles still hadn't joined the team. It was Jos Capito still in charge. Latifi was still being retained in that second seat, even though he'd shown zero progress alongside George Russell. But bringing that Savina Lavazza bag from his old man's business empire was clearly helping keep the lights on in Grove. I mean, look at the lack of sponsors. Compare that 2022 Williams to how the car's looking in 2025, and it's a similar turnaround to what we've seen at McLaren. Alex going to Williams was signing up to a big project with a lot of ambition, but very, very far from where we see them today, where, you know, they're passing Mercedes and finishing ahead of Ferraris on merit. Crazy. Yet jumping into that environment, Alex was going to have to do all the heavy lifting himself. Look, I don't need to go into a super detailed analysis of how Alex Albon outperformed both Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargeant convincingly during his time as their teammates in 22-23 in the first half of 24. Top line qualifying numbers in 22, Alex was over 4 tenths quicker than Latifi on average, and in 23 he was over 5 tenths clear of Logan Sargeant on average. Beat your teammate is the first priority as a Formula One driver, and he convincingly did that. But it didn't really tell us anything, did it? You've got two very, very unproven teammates. One that is as clear as a pay driver gets, and the other that had a decent F2 career, but, you know, Williams Academy graduate, helped him being American, I think, as well, with the Rilton being a US-based firm. How much can you really glean from Alex beating them two? And look, Alex hasn't been perfect in his Williams years. Of course he hasn't. He's had a few too many crashes for my liking, but there's also been standout performances. Think Canada, think Australia, where he raced the entire Grand Prix pretty much bar the last lap on a single set of tyres. Like, he's done well. All in all, the Williams stint prior to this year has grown his stock back, where most people think, all right, yeah, he deserves a shot, but also you put in a kind of ceiling on Alex because it's like, well, it's only been against Latifi and Sargent. Is he a top level driver, or is he just being made to look good by having really poor teammates? I completely understand why there's so much skepticism about Alex Albon. I really do. Then of course James Vowles joined the team at the end of 22, started to gradually change things up. Alex was doing the job on the track, Vowles was shifting the Excel spreadsheets off of it. Pat Fry came in as Chief Technical Officer as well. All the pieces gradually starting to fall into place, and I think we're seeing it pay off now in terms of the car that they're able to give their drivers. So then 2024 comes around, Alex Albon's looking good, decent start to the season, 2 P11s in the first 3 races, a superb P9 in Monaco. He was driving well, and that couldn't be said for the other side of the garage, unfortunately, where Logan was not hooking it up at all. He had his moments, but they were far too sporadic. Williams gave him a fair crack of the whip, but then Zandvoort shunts big time in FP3, the worst session to shunt in, because of course then that means you can't qualify. They'd had enough, he was out the car, and they chucked in another unproven driver, someone they'd tested out in FP1 in Silverstone earlier on that season, a young Argentinian by the name of Franco Colapinto. And this time around, things wouldn't be quite so easy. When presented with an opportunity, whether you make the most of it or not comes down to a variety of factors. Do you have the talent? Do you have the mentality? Do you garner support from the fan base? Do you work well with the team? That second Williams garage had been a low performance environment for far too long, with Franco coming in as a relatively unknown prospect who knew how things were going to change. Well, pretty immediately Franco showed he was not playing about. Race 1, just over half a second off of Alex in his very first qualifying session at Monza. Race 2, he was quicker than Alex in both Q2 and Q3 in Baku by over 3/10 in that final run. Converted the P8 in the race for good measure too, right behind Albon. Race 3 in Singapore, he was within 7 thousandths of Alex in qualifying and finished just shy of the points in P11. And race 4 in Austin, he out-sprint qualified Alex by over 4/10, made it all the way to SQ3 and bagged a P10 finish point in the main race to seal the deal on a great weekend. He proved more in those 4 races alone than the Latifi or Sargent did at any point in their Williams careers. And all of a sudden, Alex had something to be really concerned about, a younger, more marketable driver with serious pace in the other car. How would he respond? Well, to be honest, I think it lit a bit of a fire up his rear end, which I think he needed. It'd been 2.5 seasons of cruising relative to your teammate, and now Franco's in. His Argentinian backers and sponsors are in full voice. It's time for business, mate. Now, of course, things didn't end so well for Franco. Some nasty shunts in Vegas, Qatar and Brazil. A crashiness crept in to somewhat undermine his performances, not completely, but to an extent. Head-wise, Alex did come out on top when it comes to qualifying pace, but by less than a tenth, 0.081 according to my calculation. So actually very close, although I'm only looking at the 11 representative sessions there, and I'm ignoring Brazil qualifying where Alex put over 2 seconds on Colapinto because that was in the rain. I don't feel like personally it's fair to include that in the average, but I'm putting it on record. Colapinto proved, like many rookies can, that he absolutely has the pace over a single lap to merit a position in Formula 1, which of course now he does have with Alpine. But there was no room at the inn alongside Alex Albon for 2025 because Williams has signed up their drivers. Albon was on a long-term contract, and Williams still wanted to keep him, and Carlos Sainz being on the market, courted by many a team, and punted on Williams in the end, which again, right now, compared to all the other options that were available to him, he absolutely made the right choice. But also, this was finally, for the first time since 2020, the challenge, the known entity in the other car, so we could see where Alex Albon really stacks up. I mean, Carlos Sainz is about as proven as Formula 1 drivers come, alongside Max at Toro Rosso, Nico at Renault, Norris at McLaren, Leclerc at Ferrari. He has had known quantity teammates consistently throughout his career. The only non-Red Bull race winner in 2023, outscored a rookie Norris in both years they were teammates at McLaren. Plenty of qualifying and race dubs over a prime Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. Racing IQ through the roof, a great communicator with his team, a strategic mind. With such an accomplished driver being let go by Ferrari at his peak, That was obviously very, very difficult for him to accept, but he decided Williams was the team he had the most confidence in, getting him back to the top sooner rather than later. Known entity teammate, great for Alex. Also slightly different compared to Verstappen in 2020 is that, of course, Sainz is coming into Alex's house, right? Alex has been at this team since 2022. Sainz is the guy coming in, whereas with Max, Alex was jumping into the seat alongside Max that Max had been in since 2016. And fan expectation for Carlos Sainz at Williams was very, very high. And I know it's very, very fair to say, most of you predicted this would only go one way. Sainz would batter Albon. Now, in my pre-season predictions video, I did predict that Albon Sainz would actually be the closest teammate pairing in all of F1. And at 6 out of 24 races done so far, a quarter of the way through the season, well, qualifying head-to-head gap-wise, I'm pretty spot on. Right now, Albon's averaging a 10th over Sainz in qualifying, but there is a long way to go. And there's a lot more settling Carlos needs to do. This is Carlos's first time ever driving with Mercedes power unit, the chassis, the engineering team. Like, there's a lot for Carlos to bed himself into. This was kind of the purpose of this 25 season, really for him. The priority anyway is to get settled into the team ahead of a 2026 maybe title push. Wouldn't that be sick? With 18 races still to go, look, I've got no reason to believe they won't still be super close, and Carlos will continue to, you know, close that qualifying deficit to Albon, where it will basically be flip a coin, see who qualifies ahead of the other. Like, that's how I feel. And I didn't just back Alex to be close to Carlos because I'm a fan and I'm biased and I'm deluded. Like, I do genuinely think if you look hard enough, the signs were there. Close to George and Lando in F2, close to Kvyat in his rookie season, and very, very decent at Red Bull still in his rookie season. We know that Red Bull second seat does not give a fair and accurate representation of a driver's pace. We saw it with Gasly, we saw it with Perez, we saw it with Albon, we saw it with Lawson, and we're seeing it right now with Tsunoda. We even saw Alex carry a very similar performance advantage relative to Latifi to the performance advantage George had over Latifi. There have always been signs that Alex is actually a very, very competent racing driver, and it's just the damage to his stock that 2020 season did. For some people, that will never leave their minds. But I don't think it's the truth. It's not the reality that we sit with now in 2025. Look, if Williams can give Albon and Sainz a top car in 26, 27 seems to be the more likely year. That's certainly what Alex has said. He feels like 27 is the bigger opportunity for the team. I mean, obviously that would be incredible. Genuinely, I would back for a title charge Sainz over Albon because he's more experienced fighting at the very front. He's won races, he's put it on pole. Alex hasn't done any of that. But I'm not going to distract myself with future talk and who's going to be on top in the future. Right now, I'm just going to bask in Williams' resurgence because it is so nice to see that iconic name getting back at the front. It's always nice seeing a team come from nowhere and get somewhere, but Williams, you know, they've got history in this game, and Williams being back it just feels right. But anyway, that was a long one. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.